Hey everyone, my name is Sahil, and I'm joined today by Tyler. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes, and we'll give folks a few minutes to join. As we are doing that, I would love if the people who are in this room already would just go to chat and post where you are joining from today. It's interesting, we have people from all over, but so far nobody has repeated their cities. Okay, so for people who are just joining in, the prompt is if you can post in the chat which city you're joining from. I see we have someone from Ireland. Isn't this like 3 a.m.? If that is not dedication to your craft, then I don't know what is. No, 5 p.m. Okay. Okay, we'll just give folks maybe one more minute to join and then we'll begin. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. My name is Sahil Agarwal. I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Rattle, and today we are joined by Tyler Lang, who is the VP of RevOps and Strategy at Lead IQ. Tyler, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sal. It's great to be here. Appreciate you guys having me on. Like you mentioned, I'm with Lead IQ. I've been here for about 6, going on 7 years, and I oversee our RevOps enablement and sales dev functions here at Lead IQ. But I've been able to explore a lot of different areas over the business over the last few years. Started out in sales and held a variety of different roles. So excited to be here and talk RevOps with you.
I think one of the things that is fascinating about your role, Tyler, or the progression of your role, is you used to be a former sales leader. You used to carry a bag, and now you're doing RevOps.
Yeah.
So I love that you have seen both sides of the equation.
We call it a recovering salesperson. Yeah, that's where I
Yeah.
spent the first few years of my career and how I got into Lead IQ. But yeah, for the last 3 or so years, I've been focused more on RevOps.
And for anyone who doesn't know what Lead IQ does, can you introduce what your company does?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we are a prospecting platform, mainly used by salespeople. So anything from finding the right contacts and people to reach out to, capturing information, integrating with CRMs and other systems that you might be using. And then lately, we've been really focused on how do we help people take the next step? How do we make sure that you're actually set up to go reach out to the right people, right time, with the right message, and build pipeline? So everything pipeline is what Lead IQ is focused on.
Nice. And I would admit that your branding is pretty on point. I've known about Lead IQ for the last 5 or 6 years.
It's good
Uh,
to hear.
and um, And everyone who is joining in, thank you so much for joining on a Wednesday morning, a couple of weeks before we get into the true holiday season. Without further ado, let me share my screen and we'll get this party started. The reason why we are having this conversation is we recently did a survey to understand the state of RevOps as we enter 2025. And what we'll spend most of the conversation today is looking at the findings or the insights from the study and thinking what's next and what needs to be mitigated. Um, the two people that you're seeing on the screen are like I started Rattle a couple of years ago, and Tyler leads RevOps at Lead IQ. My perspective is an outside perspective where I speak to a lot of RevOps people because that is the persona that Rattle sells to. And if you're not aware of Rattle, just to make sure we give you a rundown, we started Rattle because the amount of time that RevOps sales managers and senior sales leaders spend to get reps to update CRM is absolutely insane. There should not be a single moment spent to get reps to update CRM, but as we all know, it's a lot. The way we do that is um, we go through call recordings and emails, and using AI, either we can automatically update CRM. So imagine if economic buyer is not filled in, that will can automatically fill the economic buyer. But more importantly, it can send the insight directly to the sales manager or the rep inside of Slack or Teams. So let's say if the economic buyer is, we know who the economic buyer is, but the seller has never met the economic buyer or the economic buyer has serious concerns. AI can surface those risks directly to the sales manager in real time so people can remediate and take action. If you're interested to know more about Rattle and how do we do what we do, feel free to go to the website and request a demo, and we'd love to show you the platform. And the results speak for themselves. We have seen increase in win rates, renewal win rates, reduction in sales cycle times, and data capture, which one is pretty easy, which is taking it from 69 to 97%. Moving on the state of RevOps, I think this is the beat of the topic today. Just a quick background on who we heard from. Majority of the people that we heard from were in revenue operations and sales operations. There was marketing operations, CS ops, and sales enablement as well, and some sales leadership, but more than 60% of the audience was in RevOps and sales ops. In terms of their seniority, it was ICs and manager and director and senior directors, kind of the same mix as we have in this webinar today. And in terms of the company size, it was primarily between 0 to 500 employees, with about one third from larger organizations than that. The first insight that I wanted to share here, which is we asked the respondents, how is RevOps perceived within the company? And there is, we have done state of RevOps for the last couple of years, and we have always seen this metric has increased year over year, which shows that is gaining recognition. Obviously, we all know that LinkedIn ranked RevOps as the highest or the most number of roles that were open in RevOps last year. And hopefully we'll see something similar, but RevOps is gaining more and more recognition. Speaking of that, if you haven't seen the report, we'll send you the link so that you can download the report and see all the amazing insights. But the biggest piece is that 67% or two-thirds of respondents uh, perceive RevOps as a pivotal role in their organization, or their organizations view their role as pivotal. And then has it increased or decreased over the last few years? Again, two-thirds think that this year it was even more valuable. And this is not a surprise because as we came down from the high of 2021 and 2022, where money was cheap and interest rates were 0%, nobody was looking at data. Every rep was hitting quota and things were all rosy. But as budgets became tighter, RevOps came to more prominence because you had to do with far less as we all had before. And I think that's where RevOps really shines, is making sure that the train or the systems run exactly as they're supposed to. But the question that I think is on almost everyone's mind is, how do we demonstrate the impact of RevOps? How do we bring awareness to what RevOps does? It's one thing to talk about RevOps do ABC, but it's another RevOps coming back with the impact that has driven. Tyler, I think this is a good jumping point for us to have a conversation around how do you show the impact of RevOps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right off the bat, maybe not showing the impact, but just kind of a side note, RevOps, at least in my experience, what I've seen over the last few years has shifted from a very proactive, or excuse me, reactive motion and function within a company, if it existed at all, to a very proactive one. In the past, RevOps wasn't even really a term we were talking about, right? We had sales ops was primarily the role that everyone knew internally. RevOps has really expanded more and taking on more of go-to-market. I think there's a branch of RevOps that supports every area of the business. But the shift from that kind of very reactive approach, I need help with this report, I need a dashboard created, I need this tool integrated, to a much more strategic, proactive function within a business, has very much promoted RevOps to a more important or a more looked upon role within a business. And I think you're seeing that in the survey results that you just showed as well. But I think a lot of the question here on how do you strengthen the awareness of this is instilling that that belief that we can actually get ahead of things. We can run a RevOps team with a strategy and be very proactive about the things we do. Try and solve problems before they become problems, right? Don't wait for them to start a fire and then have to put that out. A lot of the visibility and I'm using my experience here at Lead IQ as kind of my benchmark, but I think this is true in a lot of organizations, is getting RevOps in front of leadership on a more regular basis and a regular cadence. We do this pretty frequently on a monthly basis in our all hands meetings, but more so during QBRs. So during quarterly QBRs, where leadership is sitting down and talking about what happened last quarter, what are we focused on next quarter. This is a really great place for RevOps to insert and try and provide more of that proactive value to the rest of the business and help shape the things that we're focused on, the objectives that we're driving towards as a company, and within each team as well.
By the way, for everyone who's listening in, if you have any follow-ups, please feel free to use the Q&A in Zoom and ask those questions, and I will post them to Tyler. Tyler, when you say get ahead of things, I absolutely agree with your perspective that sales ops was treated as a servant to the sales organization, to put it very crudely. Yeah. Which is, sales organization needs this tool implemented, this report to be built, RevOps go build that. You bring up an interesting point of how to get ahead of things or get ahead of those asks and be the strategic partner. How do you even do that? And any tactical advice on where people can get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's interesting. I think a lot of it comes down to trust, right? Your sales leader, your CS leader, your marketing leader, all of your leaders at your business need to trust that RevOps is actually going to create value for them. They're not just the firefighters to put out issues when they come up, right? But making sure that we are able to actually help drive initiatives. And again, at Lead IQ, we try to do this on a quarterly basis. We obviously have our annual goals that we're all driving towards each year. But quarterly, we're going to sit down and take a look at what just happened and what are we thinking is going to happen next, and how can RevOps help that sales leader determine what are the things to focus on this quarter, help that CS leader figure out how can we reduce churn this next quarter, help the marketing leader drive more brand awareness, right? So rather than kind of being that catch-all for the problems and the issues that we need to solve, which will always exist, right? You're always going to have fires to put out and things to work on in a quick time frame and turnaround. But the more and more we can get in front of that leadership team and help actually guide the things they're going to go test and try and do, the more we can establish that trust and build a really good motion of getting ahead of those problems and identifying things before they actually become problems, right? A very simple example, right? If we miss our bookings target, there's going to be a lot of discussion around that. There's going to be a lot of work done to try and figure out why that was and how do we solve that. How can RevOps just come to the table and help you find new ways to increase bookings before you miss that target, right? So I think a lot of it, there's a lot of change management in RevOps. There's a lot of building that trust and making sure that we can actually drive business decisions by looking at data and analyzing the things that we're doing and getting ahead of that stuff rather than waiting for it to come up after it's become a problem. So again, we do this on a quarterly basis for the most part, as far as when we really sit down, lock ourselves in a room for a couple of days and talk about what we're going to be working on. But overall, very much so getting in front of trying to bring ideas to the different teams rather than wait for them to be asked for.
And Tyler, do you have an example of where you found an insight that led to positive outcomes for the business?
Yeah, actually, so a recent example at Lead IQ was very much focused on our inbound pipeline conversion. So just like any other business, we've got our inbound channels, we have our outbound channels, and we have our partner channels. Those are the three focus points for us as far as pipeline goes. What we were able to kind of see over the course of this year so far, after we made some changes coming into 2024, was that we were really increasing our top line pipeline on the inbound side in particular, which is great. More pipeline is generally a good thing, right? But along with that, our DQ rate and our conversion rates were suffering, right? So we were DQing a lot more pipeline at the top. Conversion was going down from that initial stage into actual sales pipeline. A pretty common challenge for most businesses, nothing too groundbreaking, but by watching this over the course of the year, each quarter we've made different changes to try and impact that conversion before it gets out of hand, before it becomes a big problem for us. So for example, on the inbound side, we've made a bunch of changes recently to tighten up qualifications, restrict more things from entering the funnel to begin with before we really believe that there is a path for that to be converted and become pipeline in the future. So we would expect the top number to go down, but the quality to increase and conversions to go up. And that's what we're seeing so far. So again, just one pretty basic example, but it's kind of a good framework of what's our hypothesis? What do we think is going to happen? How do we go test that and validate that? What's our solution? What are we going to try to solve? And that's how we try to kind of operate in general with anything that we're working on.
I resonate so deeply with that because I remember last year I had a conversation with my RevOps team at Rattle, and I asked them what is keeping you busy, and it was the usual stuff of there is a board meeting coming up, the CRO wants a new sales process to be implemented. We have to create all these reports and dashboards, and then there is a tool that we bought, Catalyst, that CS needs implementation for. And what I told them was, if that is what is keeping you busy, then you're a cost center, not a revenue center. For RevOps to be truly a revenue center, you have to impact revenue. You
Yeah.
have to impact win rates or top of the funnel or sales cycle. And I think the way you do that is, in my experience, is either top down or bottoms up. Top down is you look at metrics that that the sales leader does not have enough bandwidth to take a look at in a very deep way, which is, hey, our stage 2 to stage 3 conversion is far worse this quarter than before, or we are losing far more deals to this competitor than before. All of this is usually anecdotal with sales leaders and revenue leaders and CS leaders, but RevOps sits on the data. And RevOps can do this analysis in a couple of hours that a sales leader would never even think to ask. And then you can come to this QBR starter, as you mentioned, coming up with this data of, hey, this is what I noticed, and this is why I think it's happening.
Yeah.
or the bottoms up, which is what I challenged my RevOps team, is when was the last time you listened to a couple of calls in the call recorder software, whether it's Gong, Chorus, or Zoom? And I know the answer was it has been a while that they listened to a call. And I think call recorders are great for sales leaders and revenue leaders, but they're also great for RevOps team. If you want to build a bottoms up hypothesis, um, I can almost guarantee you, if you listen to three calls, you will find 20 things that are broken in the process.
Yeah.
And that's how you can come with recommendations bottoms up in these QBRs. So my experience working with more than 1,000 RevOps leaders has been that if projects is all you do, you will be treated as a revenue as a cost center, which I don't think is what RevOps should be. RevOps is an absolute revenue center. It sits on data and it sits on insights, but you have to take the extra step to find those insights. Tyler, anything to add before we move to the next part of what we found in the survey?
Just I completely agree, right? There has to be some portion of the team or some portion of your time dedicated to trying to get ahead of that stuff and trying to find that stuff, or else, like you said, you will turn into that cost center. And one of the ways that we do this here at LeadIQ, in addition to those QBRs and all hands and the different meetings and FaceTime we're getting with people, actually it also comes back to how we're setting targets and objectives as a business. So whether that's a company OKR that we're focused on for the year, for the quarter, or if it's truly like a component of someone's MBO, what they're actually getting paid on for this period of time, everything needs to drive back to those shared goals, right? So we are all going to be impacted if we hit or if we miss a particular target. I'm pretty confident most people are going to be focused on trying to get there, right? So we've it takes time. It's not easy to just come up with the right OKRs and keep our MBOs, excuse me, but we continue to try and refine this process and make sure that we are truly linking every single employee from our CEO to a brand new hire to the right objectives that the business needs to achieve its goals. And if we can do that successfully, then we have people focused on the right things. And that's when freeing up that time to try and get ahead of problems and actually solve them before they become problems tends to start happening. So I think a lot of it has to do with the visibility. When are you getting FaceTime? How are you interacting? How are you bringing things to the table in those types of settings? But also, how are you as a business aligning people to the shared goals and making sure that they are actually shared and they are actually the right goals?
100% agreed. Speaking of business goals, this is what we found on how most organizations are feeling about their goals for the upcoming year. So I think technology budgets and goals go hand in hand, and we found that 40% of folks in RevOps and SalesOps believe that their technology budget will go up. Only a 16% feel it will decrease, and almost half of the people feel it will stay the same. Now, 2 years ago, this number was only 16% people felt that it will stay the same, and almost everyone was in the boat of it will decrease. Um, so, as I said earlier, we're coming off the high of 2022, and we are now, as a full technology sector, we are setting realistic targets, and we are now able to meet those realistic targets, and in many cases, beat those realistic targets. AI has certainly played a role in that, and that's why we see 40% will increase tech budget. But the counterintuitive flip side to that is um, when we ask people how many tools are there in their tech stack, majority of people say it's more than 10 tools. Even smaller organizations have a shit ton of tools. And I was just writing down the tools that even a small company would use, and you will have to buy 8 tools just to function. And if I can talk about them, Salesforce, yes, you have to buy it, a call recorder, a forecasting platform. You need a sales enablement platform like a Seismic or HighSpot. You need a sales engagement platform like Outreach or SalesLoft. You need Gainsight, although that's debatable if you need Gainsight or Catalyst or not. and you need a commission software. Like those are 8 pieces of software that you need just to function. And when we ask people how much is that shelfware, like we got a pretty consistent 1/3 of tools, or at least the seats in those tools was considered shelfware. Tyler, I think it will be good to discuss like how do you deal with the sprawl of the Rev tech stack?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the last couple of years, like you mentioned, budgets got really tight, right? People had to make cuts. It was not an option. It just needed to be done. I think a lot of that ended up being resources, people on teams, but a lot of that ended up being tools as well. For us, what was particularly interesting, it was like it, a blessing in disguise. It was the forcing function we needed to actually sit down and evaluate these things and figure out, are we actually paying for the things that we need? Do we have the right tools that we need to be successful? And where is that bloat, that shelfware? And there's a lot of it, right? So over the last couple of years, again, it wasn't necessarily the most fun period of time needing to sit down and evaluate every single thing that we were doing to try and find ways to cut costs. But it was a really good forcing function for us to take a step back and take a look at how we were running this business from a technology standpoint and decide, where did we need to double down, where did we have bloat, where did we need to move in a different direction, right? So we're certainly in that bucket of a lot of tools and a small RevOps team here at LeadIQ. But what we've been able to do over the last couple of years is really hone in on what's going to make the biggest impact, but also consider, what do we have the capacity to actually get value out of, right? There's a million tools out there that could provide value for LeadIQ, but if we don't have the resources to implement them in a strategic way and actually make sure that we're focused on continuing to get value out of them, we're just going to be spending money for no reason, right? So we spent a lot of time kind of refining our process for not only buying new tools and implementing new tools, but also making sure that we're continually providing maintenance and looking for more ways to get value out of them, as simple as just evaluating who's using it when it's being renewed, right? If it's a user-based tool. So it's a really crucial function, I think, for a RevOps team who's typically owning the tech stack, is to make sure that that's really buttoned up, right? We can't implement everything. And our team at LeadIQ is pretty small, right? So we've got a pretty good system for evaluating tools, whether it's new or it's something we already have, but also making sure that we're dedicating the right time and energy and resources to make sure we're getting value out of it. It's not always going to work, right? You will have to make changes if you made the wrong decision, when you brought something on. But making sure that you're actually doing the work to evaluate that and make that decision is really important. And I think a lot of businesses, ourselves included, kind of got away from that for a while, when it wasn't as crucial to be hyper focused on budgets and where we're spending and what we're getting out of things. So now that things are a bit smoother, the economy is opening back up a bit, and we do believe that people will be able to spend more. It's a good reminder not to get back into that situation, right? And continue being really critical and smart about the way that we spend our time and our money on tools in particular, and making sure that we've got the resources to get value out of them.
Tyler, backstage when we're talking about tools that you have cut, I know one tool that you have cut. I won't say the name to give them bad name, but often one of the things that I've seen is we all have our egos tied to the tools that we brought in into the
Mm-hmm.
organization, and sometimes the tool are providing value, but it's not just enough of the value to have one more tool in the tech stack. How do you deal with someone who is still advocating for that particular piece of software,
Yeah,
and you have to communicate the hard decision that we are going to cut it?
yeah, no, it's a really good question, because it's very true, right? I'm guilty of that too. There's tools that I'm very fond of that I would prefer to have here that might not be the best fit for the business, right? So what we've done is it's almost a review by committee. So we've got business cases that every employee at LeadIQ, if I want to bring something on, I need to go fill out a business case, and I need to prove to you, Sahil, why we need it. What do we not have that's doing whatever this tool does? What's the financial impact going to be? How much is it going to cost us? But what can I expect to get out of it by doing so? Or what's the risk if we don't do this, right? So we've created kind of this intake system to get that baseline business case for what is this thing and why are we going to go down this path. And then there's a committee of people depending on what the tool actually is. It might be myself, it might be somebody else, it might be marketing or sales or CS leadership, whoever it is, that this tool is going to impact, that needs to sign off on it as well, right? So, and I think for all the sellers on the call, you probably see this quite a bit. You've got a large group of people making buying decisions these days, right? It's not just one person anymore. That has helped us kind of eliminate that subjectivity around Tyler really likes this tool, so we're going to go buy this tool, right? We need consensus and we need the buying group to all be in on something before we go make that decision or before we make a change. And a lot of that evaluation comes down to how are we going to use it? How are we going to implement it? How long is it going to take? Who's going to own it? Who's going to maintain it? What do we expect to get out of it? So just that initial level of doing the due diligence before saying, let's go spend these dollars, filters out a lot of the kind of bogus requests, right? If you can't build that business case to begin with, it's probably not the right tool to bring in. Or maybe it tells you that you should go back and do some more research. So that's how we do it here at Lead IQ. But that is certainly a very common thing that we see at businesses, and particularly when you see leadership change. People are very comfortable with the things they know how to use, and you join a new company. I want to bring all that stuff with me, right? This is what I know how to be successful with, so I want to implement everything that I like, right? There's a lot of stats around that happens quite a bit when people change jobs, particularly in leadership. It's when they spend the majority of their budget, right, for the year. And so there's a healthy mixture of making sure that you've got the tools that your team knows how to use and knows how to get value out of, but you're also doing the right evaluation to make sure that it's the right tool for this business and this thing that we're trying to solve.
Nina brought up a very interesting point that sellers should be part of these committees. I think one of the most insightful things that we do here at Rattle is we ask our sellers to periodically go take demos of other software. And that helps them empathize so much when they see another seller not ask them about their context, their pain point, doesn't ask enough discovery questions. And it is enlightening for them that no matter how many trainings we do, that 1 30-minute demo of another rep is very helpful. And I think, Nina, you push it one step further, which is if they can be part of these internal committees, they will have a better understanding of how to pitch to their stakeholders.
Yeah, I fully agree too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say I fully agree, Nina, with your comment there, and actually kind of trickling into yours, Mark, around what is the right business case process. How do you do this? If the tool is going to be dependent on a salesperson using it, we're absolutely going to include them in the evaluation, right? No matter how much I love it, if I can't get somebody to actually use it and get value out of it, it's worthless, right? So, and vice versa is true. They love it, but it doesn't do anything for the business, then unfortunately, it's probably not something we're going to move forward with. So depending on what the tool is, the category, it might be salespeople, it might be our engineering team, it might be anyone, right? Whoever the stakeholder is and the end user of that product absolutely should be involved in that review process and make sure that it's something that they're actually going to adopt, because I think that's what we saw a lot of in a couple of years prior was a lot of tools that did a lot of great things with very little adoption. And at that point, you're just not getting much out of the tech stack.
Yeah, my perspective as someone who is building in the RevTech space is I feel a lot of this is Salesforce's fault, which is there shouldn't be a separate enablement platform. There shouldn't be a separate forecasting platform. I get call recording is hard to do at scale, but doing forecasting and rolling up those forecasts and enablement platforms, it's not hard to build. They should be part of the CRM. They should be core to it. CPQ, CPQ should not be sold at as much money as a usual Salesforce license. It should be part of the CRM. And I would genuinely like put some of the blame at Salesforce to allow this tool sprawl, which leads to a typical 1,000 employee company having 18 different tools. That's absolutely unsustainable. And the what I compare this with is if I look at the tools that my engineering team has, they have three tools. If I look at the tools that my marketing team has, they have four tools. Any single department, finance, like nobody has more than five tools. It's just sales and revenue teams have a shit ton. And I think Salesforce has to clean up that mess some one of these days. Um, Okay, moving on. The third topic is on AI. Let me find the stat. So we asked our respondents on how are they implementing AI or how do they want to implement AI moving forward. And in most cases, it is called transcription and analysis. Uh, and then a little bit of sales forecasting and personalized content creation. And then where they want to implement AI is deal insights and recommendations, and in sales forecasting, and also automated data entry and sales coaching. So we see this huge delta between where they're using AI today is more on cost transcripts, and where they want to use AI is to get more insights on what they should be focused on. Tyler, what do you feel about AI in sales?
Yeah, I think not to just keep repeating myself, but I think a lot of this comes back to a couple of things we just talked about, right? So AI has a lot of flash and a lot of buzz. It's very easy to say AI is going to solve my problems. I don't need to go do that business case. It's an AI tool. It's just going to get it done for us, right? Unfortunately, at least what I've seen, it's not quite the case. These are still tools. These are still things that need to be maintained. These are still tools that need to be evaluated. So we at Lead IQ, I mean, we have a flavor of all of those different categories that we're testing and implementing. Some things have become permanent parts of our process. Some things are new, but we're still going to do that healthy amount of due diligence to make sure that this is something we can really get value out of. We provide an AI functionality ourselves, right? So this is something our customers are doing too. Um, it's it's not a one size fits all. It's not a silver bullet to cure all problems, right? There's still needs to be really a strategy implemented around these tools. And there are certainly really great tools out there in those categories, and AI is helping these systems be more valuable. But I think they still all require that attention and that level of planning and thought and strategy to make sure that this is going to be something that's really going to move the needle for us. I think there was an initial big hype around all of these AI systems coming out and all the different things they did. And I think we saw a little mini version of what we saw a few years ago, which is let's go buy all of them and let's set them up, and AI will solve all our problems, right? So there's certainly a place. We are certainly evaluating and taking a look and using and trying and finding new ways to leverage AI internally at Lead IQ and in our own product. But it's still, to me, falls into that same category of this is something that requires much more thought, much more strategy. It's not just a band-aid to slap on and move on with your day.
You know, Tara, I know we talked about this backstage, but I put out a post yesterday on LinkedIn asking what are some innovative uses of AI other than just it helps me summarize my calls and I can ask
Mm-hmm.
questions. And I was surprised that there wasn't a single solid entry which was at the same scale as what Uber did in the mobile platform shift. Um, so I, I get the point on it requires a lot of thinking and strategy, but I am also surprised that we haven't seen a breakthrough implementation of AI yet. Um, If I can quickly plug what Rattle is launching later today, we have built a platform over the last couple of months, which can analyze your calls and emails, tens of thousands of calls and emails that scale, and can hopefully in a few minutes tell you which deals are at risk, which customers are at risk of churn, and help you do things like win loss analysis. I don't know if this is truly game changing. I'm biased and I think it is, but it is available or would be available in public beta for anyone to try and use and see for the use case. So I'm gonna just plug this in, and again, it will be launched later today. So, but if anyone wants to see what a true implementation of breakthrough implementation of AI could look like, I think this might be a good starting point. But coming out of the shilling rattle, Tyler, which tools have you implemented that have brought AI into your revenue tech stack?
Yeah, good question. So again, we're kind of dabbling in a lot of those different areas. So we absolutely use transcript and call analysis that's kind of helping us get a quicker summary and a better understanding of what just happened. Internally at Elite IQ, we use Gong for that, where we have a go-to-market partnership with them, and we get a lot of value out of the Gong platform. Chatbots, same thing. Forecasting, we're also leveraging Gong for that. Our own product is more in the personalized content creation category for salespeople. So that's something we're using ourselves internally, but also pushing out for our customers. We have tried some of these more deal insight, opportunity insight type of systems, and we haven't nailed it yet by any means. I don't think we'll ever nail anything. We're always trying to learn and evolve and get better, but we have AI kind of implemented in a lot of different areas. One specific example, which I think this is something close to Rattle as well, is really around adoption of our sales methodology, which at Lead IQ is MEDDIC, right? So there's all different kinds of versions of those acronyms and MEDDPIC and MEDDIC,
Yeah.
1C or 2C, whatever that is. But we're leveraging AI in our call recordings to try and decipher, have we found our economic buyer? Have we checked a box on a particular piece of MEDDIC? But a lot of it comes back to making sure we have the adoption of it and it's being used, and it's helping not only our team better understand our deals, but our reps get better at being reps, right? If we're not getting better analysis of the opportunities and the deals we're working, it's not serving a purpose for the business. If it's not helping a seller get better at being a seller and make their lives easier, it's not helping them, right? So we've gotten them into a pretty good system where, through a bit of AI helping us understand what's going on in calls, rep input and overlay over the top of that to confirm and take a look and say, yeah, this is the person that's my economic buyer. This is the person that should fill out that box. And then really good process and enablement around how does that get into Salesforce? How does that dictate whether or not you can move forward from stage 2 to stage 3, whatever that might be? We've tried to create a system where we're getting more efficient by using that AI tool. We're speeding up the process, but at the same time, we're kind of behind the scenes enabling and training our sellers to identify that stuff as well, right? And this is going to help them. It's not going to teach them that they don't need to pay attention to that anymore. So I think that's an interesting thing that kind of comes up with these AI tools when you're thinking about augmenting and enhancing a person. At what point are you actually detracting from what that person is capable of because you're just doing too much of the job for them? Should you just be replacing that person instead of making them better, right? So I think that's a really interesting question and divide that we're starting to kind of see in the market as companies are taking one approach versus the other. But what we've tried to do is find ways to leverage AI tools to be more efficient as a business, but also enhance the people that work here and make them better and help them learn faster as well.
Tyler, I as a product person who thinks a lot about how to use AI, what I have internalized so far is you shouldn't be building AI for sellers directly. There are a lot of tools that have come up in the last 2 years that help sellers, but they don't really work, or they are not really bought. The ones that are bought are the ones that helps RevOps or sales managers or leaders, because
Yeah.
they are the ones who do not have anything other than go listen to call recordings in Gong or Chorus. So at least our philosophy is to build AI that will help enable the frontline manager or the second line manager to identify where their reps are deviating off process. And speaking of process, the last part this in our state of RevOps for 2025, at least for this webinar, the actual report has more than 10 sections. Is we polled them on how much revenue do you think your teams are missing out because your people are not following processes or playbooks. And just to clarify, which the one thing that everyone here knows is that your sales methodology is not your playbook. MedPick is not your playbook. MedPick is the ingredients, but the dish is the playbook. And what we found is at least 10% revenue is lost due to process gaps. And this is not surprising because if you listen to gong calls from your bottom 50% reps, it will become clear that why they are losing some deals. Like they were given those trainings, but they never uh, really internalized those trainings. And then we ask them, then if you are losing 10 to 20% of the revenue just because of Fed sellers not following sales processes, how do you monitor if they're doing it or not? And it was it the results were again surprising, which is we are just looking at dashboards with activity metrics to understand leading indicators. And then it was all on sales managers. If you look at these three, this is all just sales managers doing it manually. They are asking all those questions in team meetings, and I'm sure Tyler, you would have done that when you were carrying a bag, and then listening to call recordings. And the last interesting piece is we use the data that they enter into Salesforce to somewhat understand what's happening in opportunities. But when we polled sales leaders specifically on do they trust that data, it's 15% said not at all, and 62% said somewhat. Only 24% actually relied on that data. And I have an interesting tidbit to share here. While working on the Rattle AI product that I just posted the beta link for in the chat, we found that when we fed it just call and email data, the results were 97% accurate. But when we fed it Salesforce data that was entered by the rep, the accuracy dropped to 70%, which is human entered input, which is very hard to get them to input, reduce the quality of the overall output. So, Tyler, the prompt to you is how do we stop ourselves chasing reps to update the CRM?
Yeah. It's those are really interesting stats. I'm not surprised. They're a little ironic, right? Because the seller's on the floor when we include the notes and the things that they're finding that actually lowers the accuracy of our results, right? What's interesting, I think one of the fundamental reasons we have issues with your question, chasing reps to update things, is they're really busy, right? They have a million things to do, and updating a few fields in Salesforce is like the last thing that they actually want to do or that they have time for, right? So um, we always think of sales as a bit of an art and a science. It's not fully one or the other. And your best sales reps are going to be really good at leveraging the science piece of it, but they apply their art and their skill on top of it, right? Um, when we think about how do we remove the need for a rep to actually go update those things and do those kind of background tasks that absorb time and don't necessarily move things forward and potentially skew our results. I think it's very much how can we automate away the science piece of that and let them focus on the art. That's why we hired them, right? If there was no art to sales, we wouldn't need salespeople, right? We would just have robots and computers doing all of our sales for us because it would just purely be science. It's not the case. I think we do need that layer And that's what those people bring to the table. So how do we find ways to get them to focus on that and take everything else off their plate? So at Lead IQ, and this kind of goes back through all the topics we talked about today, whenever we are thinking about a new tool, a new process, a new enablement session, a new anything that we're going to roll out, particularly for the go-to-market reps, we're trying to focus on kind of three main things, which is automating a process, getting better data, getting better results, right? We don't want to skew them further. We want to get more accurate information and really defining a process and putting process in place around it so that it's repeatable. We can do it again and do it at scale and do it over and over. So when it comes to getting reps out of the mundane tasks of updating the CRM, a lot of the different things we're trying to find are to automate away the stuff that we know we can gather from the machine. We know we can gather from the call recordings. We know we can gather with very good accuracy without that human input, and shift their energy and time to those things that we can't do with the machine, right? And let them be who we hired them to be, which is a very good strategic seller. So again, like using that same example around how we use Medic at Lead IQ, we're trying to put as much analysis around Medic in front of the reps as we possibly can through call recordings and through automations and through AI, and let them say, yes, that is accurate, or no, you missed. This is the actual, again, economic buyer, whatever piece of Medic we're talking about, but speed up that process, right? I don't want to send them back to a call, go listen to the 45-minute meeting you just had, refresh yourself, think about Medic, and then fill out these fields. I want you to go work on the next one, right? Just tell us if this is right or wrong. Instill that in the back of your mind as something that's important for us to understand and move on and go do it again. So everything we're focused on is really, again, around, do we have good data coming out of whatever it is that we're doing? Do we have a good process around it? And how much of that can we automate away so we can have people focus on, what they're good at, and the reason that we hired them.
I love that perspective. I know that we have 7 minutes, and I want to get to some of these questions that are that have been asked in chat. And for everyone else, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. And if we can't get to them during the remaining 7 minutes, we'll email you with what we think could be the right answer, or at least what we think is the answer. Tyler, Mark asked this really insightful question on RevOps has 100 tasks, 80 of them are tactical and 20 are strategic. But CEOs like myself will rate them on those 20 tasks and not the 80. Those 80 are the cost center and the 20 are the revenue center. But then if 20% of their job leads to 100% of their performance review, then that's not fair. Like, how do we, and I appreciate Mark giving a shout out to Rattle on Rattle taking care of the 80%, but how do we systematically remove the 80% or reduce the 80% from their plate so they can focus on the strategic stuff?
Yeah, I think there will always be a bucket there, right? There's always the fires that need to be put out. There's always the immediate things that we need to action right now that do not tie into one of our strategic goals for the quarter or the year or whatever it is that we're working on. Something that we've kind of done in our RevOps team at Lead IQ, and kudos to all the product and engineering teams out there that have been doing this for a lot longer, is we've really stolen their process, right? It's like, we have a roadmap. We have every single project we're working on detailed out on this roadmap. We have owners, we have due dates, we have statuses, we have notes, we have progress updates, right? It's visible to everyone at the business. And then we also have intake systems for the small things, for the immediate action items that come up that need to be addressed. Very much like a support team would have, right? They're intaking issues all of the time. So by creating a very transparent system, we can not only show someone like you, the CEO, hey, here are the big rocks that we're working on moving, but here's all the other little stuff that came in that's focused on right now as well. Both are being managed, but being able to really run this team more like a product or engineering team with those roadmaps and those timelines and that project management has been able to really help us give everyone a better picture of what's actually going on, but be organized and stay on top of stuff because, like you said, there's a million things coming up. If you don't have a good system for it, you will not get everything accomplished. It's just not possible. So I think being very rigorous with how you organize and create a team and have them focus on the right things is really important.
I think you mentioned a very key point there, which is run the team like a product and engineering org. So engineering is the backbone of product,
Mm-hmm.
and RevOps is the backbone of revenue. But somehow we have the ops title there, which makes it seem like operational stuff, but it should be engineering.
Probably,
RevOps,
yeah.
right? Like RevOps should be run like an engineering org, which is it should have its own Jira kind of a system where
Yep.
requests come in, they get prioritized. There should be a product manager or a revenue manager that prioritizes the request and make sure what's being worked on is the most highest impact item and not what the CRO thinks on that particular day should get worked on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
to any CRO who are who are who are here listening to this. Um, no, I agree. The the last piece, maybe we can pick one more thing here. I think there was a question uh, from Snyder on if I can elaborate on top down and bottom up KPIs that I asked my RevOps team to highlight. Um, my top down is what insights have you drawn from the data? Again, a CRO is just basing his ask for data on hunch. So they will have a hunch on something and they will ask data. But RevOps sits on data. So RevOps can do an analysis of, hey, are we winning more deals from this data source or less deals from this data source? Uh, what are reps good at and what are reps bad at? Which stage are we losing most of our deals in? I was very surprised. My RevOps leader, when they went through data, they came up and said, hey, our enterprise win rates this year are one third of what they were last year. And that was an insight that I would have not gotten to myself, or my sales leader would not have gotten that insight because like this was hidden in plain sight in a mountain of data. And when RevOps brought this insight, it was eye-opening. And then we changed so many things in the company to make sure our enterprise win rates do not drop by 67%. So that's top down, which is what high-level initiatives can you drive by looking at data. But then bottoms up is again very simple. If you listen to a couple of calls, I know most RevOps people do not listen to calls, but if you force yourself to listen to 3 calls a week, we will find so many process inefficiencies. Our sellers are not sending follow-up emails. Our sellers are not talking about the enablement collateral that we talked about. Our sellers are really bad at mentioning or dethroning a competitor that you can use to create those enablement courses, and they don't have to be based on hunch. So those are just some of the examples of how I ask our RevOps team to do this both from a top down and a bottoms up perspective. Um, this Tyler, I want to thank you. We have a minute left. This has been a really insightful conversation. I think the one key takeaway for me is RevOps is the engineering team and not an operations team. It's not a cost center, it's a revenue center. And it is still early. The role is changing constantly year after year. But I have a firm belief that RevOps in 10 years will be more valuable than sellers.
Yeah.
Like AI, AEs will or should or could become a reality in 10 years. But what will be more impactful is the insight layer, which I think RevOps is primed to be. So I appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation on this topic. And then for everyone, if you haven't seen the rest of the report, please go to our website and download the State of RevOps 2025. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, and hope everyone has a great holidays.
Thanks, Sahil. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.